Just to kick things off, it's great to see you all. I think we are in what is the Washington State Legislature runs on a 2-year cycle. Okay. So the first year of the biennium is a 105-day session. And then the second year is a 60-day session. So this year we are in the 105-day session, which means that they are going to be negotiating all of the major state budgets. So that is the general fund operating budget, which pays for education, pays for healthcare, pays for all of the major state spending activities. It also is the capital budget, which is where the state funds school construction, higher education construction, and general government construction of buildings. So that is also usually all of your local legislators will be working on local projects and local or funding for all kinds of different local construction projects and other. There is quite a bit of resource within there for community projects also. So please connect with your local legislators and try and find what they're working on in terms of supporting local community activities through the capital budget. And then also the transportation budget. I want to spend a little bit of time on the transportation budget because I know you guys are focused on the Gorse Coalition, have been very involved with all of them. One of the challenges this year that the transportation budget is facing, and it's not just transportation budget, it's all budgets and everyone is dealing with this, and that is the inflationary pressure on materials, on labor, all of the things. Every project in the state has escalated in costs. So the legislature is trying to figure out how to backfill any of those projects that are frankly over budget just by, again, all of these inflationary pressures. The Gorse Coalition, the Gorse Project is not alone in that. And the governor's office pushed quite a few projects back. What I've heard is that the Gorse Project was one of those. So I know the coalition is going to be working to try and get that money pushed back forward and not create any delays around that. Again, the challenge is every project out there is doing that right now, and they're trying to figure out how to navigate that that process. One of the big wild cards that is going to be incorporated into that transportation budget is you have the first auction of the Climate Commitment Act, first carbon auction the end of February. Now, there is an expectation that quite a bit more resource is going to come in from that auction than what was originally estimated. But that said, they're just not sure how much money is going to be there. So the expectation is there's going to be more than they expected. So then maybe they'll be able to backfill some of at least the transit and non-road projects, which means maybe they can free up some additional resource to go back into some of these road projects, as well as maybe move some bonding forward. Again, all of these things are being negotiated right here. I would, or over the next couple of months, I would definitely engage directly with the folks who are managing that Gorse Coalition, because they're probably closer and a little more in the know as far as what is actually happening there.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. That is very great information. And Emily Randall she's on the Transportation Committee. She might be the chair.
No, she's not the chair, but she's on, and I know that this is certainly one of the major things that she's working on.
Correct.
Again, I don't want to. I don't have perfect knowledge as far as everything that's going on there, but please connect with that Gorse Coalition.
Yeah.
Also this year, really big is housing and trying to really build the supply side of the housing issue. So legislation that would basically minimize, or I don't like the word ban, but certainly prevent single family zoning. So single family zones are going to have to, if it passes, have to take duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, some of that infill housing that is really needed to kind of build up the density and those things. So that's very much in the mix right now. You also have some transit-oriented development legislation in terms of really packing in the density around transit hubs. And there's some interest in ADU, accessory dwelling units, and trying to figure out how to make those more flexible. All of those issues are really being focused on the supply side of the equation. Also in this housing discussion, and it's a little more controversial, is what's being called the stability side of this, which is, depending on where you sit on the issue, you wouldn't use these terms, but it's things like rent control or rent stabilization, or minimizing what kind of increases landlords can increase. Those issues are also being discussed. I think one of the challenges that's going to occur around this whole housing conversation is if all those issues come together into some sort of a linked package, does that potentially jeopardize all of the issues? So again, a lot of this will play out, but those are obviously taking a lot of time within the legislative process this year. And I don't know whether this is super top of mind, but it's certainly going to take a lot of time within the legislative process, and that's trying to improve the permitting environment for energy projects, transmission projects, all of those kinds of things. There's a realization that if we are going to really try and move in this decarbonized pathway, we're going to need a lot more electrons, and we're going to need to figure out how to produce those electrons and get those electrons where they need to go. So that's taken up a lot of airtime within the legislative process. I'll flag really quickly for folks in the issue area of taxes. There's two sort of tax proposals that are out there right now. One is being called a margins tax, which is generally being viewed as a potential replacement for the B&O tax. Within the reports I send, there's some information on that. There was a hearing on that. I'm not sure the legislature is quite ready to go and completely gut and replace the business tax structure in this state, but it is going to be an ongoing conversation certainly this year. So I would look at how that margins tax is structured. The other conversation is around a wealth tax, which is, theoretically applied to, I believe, people making over $250 million a year, and is targeted at the ultra wealthy. Again, I'm not sure how much momentum that has, or whether that's more designed to foster conversation, but that is also in the mix. One tax issue that is not going to be have any work done on it, at least what we've been told from both Senate and House leadership, is the long-term care tax. That is going to be implemented in July, and they do not appear to want to make any changes to that for a variety of reasons. So that's kind of in the area of tax policy. I think there may be some other elements around real estate taxes, again, linking into housing and affordable housing, but those really haven't emerged yet as far as, any momentum. In the area of I guess law enforcement and public safety, two of the issues that are really going to be taking up a lot of time this year. One is trying to navigate any changes to the police pursuit legislation that passed a couple of years ago. Legislature is trying to figure out if there are appropriate ways to make those changes. That's going to be controversial, and I expect a lot of time to be spent on that. The other issue is the Blake decision. And for those who are aware, that was basically the Supreme Court effectively created or eliminated kind of the illegal nature of drug possession. And the legislature has to act to figure out how to treat drug possession going forward, and what kind of either criminal penalties or what kind of treatment resources are going to need to be associated with those. That is going to be a very controversial subject and take a lot of time this year. So those are kind of the primary issue areas that are certainly being discussed right now. probably easier for me to stop right there and cover other issues that you guys may have an interest in. Again, I just kind of threw a lot at you. But I'm happy to either dive deeper on any of those, or if there are subject matters that I can cover that you guys have interest in.
Brad, one of the things that the chamber has been asked by the hospital, there's a bill, and I don't have if it's Senate or if it's
the nurse staffing legislation.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's the read on that? Because they want us to oppose it because
So just in terms of full disclosure, I also represent hospitals.
Okay.
All of whom are very much opposing this legislation. I'm sure your hospital asked you to oppose it.
They did.
The core issue there is when you apply staffing mandates, meaning minimum staffing ratios for nurses and other staff in hospitals that they don't have. There just aren't the nurses. I guarantee your hospital probably has hundreds of open positions right now that they can't fill.
Correct.
It's not going to be helped by trying to add financial penalties that occur when you can't meet those staffing ratios. We tend to believe that trying to figure out how to massively increase the pipeline of healthcare workers and figure out how to get those training and open up those pathways as much as possible would be a better idea. But that is certainly an issue that's been around a long time and going to continue. They did change the legislation a little bit. The advocates, rather than a pure statutory mandate, they basically said L&I will have to go and create staffing ratios and pushed it out 4 years to try and minimize budgetary impact. Challenge there is that no one believes that L&I will do anything other than through rule implement ratios that would be the same as the statutory construct from last year. So it's a workaround from a structural position or from a process perspective here in Olympia, but it's effectively the same thing as what has been tried several years before. So I'm not going to tell you how your organization should vote on that or should take a position on that, but it is going to have massive impacts on hospitals, and hospitals are struggling right now, no matter what. So
I think that's one of the questions I have, is whether it's appropriate for a Chamber of Commerce to take a position on an issue like that. I mean, is there enough learning that we can do to, make ourselves qualified to judge whether those ratios are, how those play into costs and how far things should be kicked out before it impacts budgets? Or is that something that's really better reserved, to folks like the ones that you represent that are industry specific?
Yeah, here's what I will say is that there's a variety of chambers around the state that have taken a position, including both AWB and I think Seattle Chamber and others. So you wouldn't be alone in taking that position, but I also think it's appropriate for you to connect with your local hospitals and understand the impacts.
What is AWB's position?
They're opposed.
Okay.
Are all of the chambers consistent in their positions?
Never.
I don't know. I don't know that. I just know that there are some that are opposed.
And it's a relatively new thing that businesses are calling us for support on bills. Because of the influence now that we have with that. So
I think the hospitals would say that this impacts the entire community, especially the business community, because if these things really impact the bottom line and they have to start making really difficult decisions about care coverage and services that they provide, that impacts everybody. Again, I am biased. I do represent hospitals who have a very, very specific position. So if you want to get a broader.
Yeah. The other thing is how likely is it to come out of committee to get a vote? Very likely. Okay. Because that was what I was waiting on, because I don't want to upset anybody before we, talk to the board about it. But
Yeah, no, this is this issue always comes down to the wire. So it will move through committees and it will
Okay.
be, floor battles, certainly in the House, and be very active all the way till the end of session.
Yeah, because I think Tara Simmons is the sponsor of the thing. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is a perennial battle between the hospitals and their nursing unions.
okay,
It's been around a long time.
absolutely. Yeah.
So I have a question regarding the Blake decision.
hmm
Do you feel that it will actually be addressed? Because I've heard a few things saying that they may not address it, and then it will revert to basically all drugs are legal in the state of Washington, and there will really be no criminal consequences.
Well, you're asking the right question. I don't know whether I'm going to give you a satisfactory answer, which is going to be, I think that the legislature is going to do something. But that said, whether that something is criminal or, is returning to, kind of the historic criminalization model, something in between, what kind of consequences or what kind of requirements on law enforcement for treatment services, what kind of resources are going to be available. There are tons of elements to that. I do think they're going to try and do something, though. I think nothing will, them walking away from the issue will be difficult for the legislature to explain when they go back to their communities.
So great, thank you. I do appreciate that. I think there's what I'm a big proponent of this legislator, meeting today. So I think for us to really make people aware of what's going on, I see different organizations. Maybe the chamber doesn't want to take a position on things, but I think getting some of these lead issues out to the community, saying, hey, please contact your senator, please contact whoever it may be, and people can form their own decisions, but making it easier for the public to be able to communicate what they feel on these issues would also be very helpful in the state right now.
And Shauna, we agree with you on that. So
I mean, I what I would say is that this is, you might connect with other entities within the community who have a higher level of knowledge as far as what the desired outcome is, and partner with them on some communicating to the legislature. I think sending emails, writing letters, and then, if you really want to get ambitious, coming to Olympia and meeting with your local legislators. They also do town halls, usually about halfway through session. So making yourself available for those are all great ways to communicate your desires to the legislature. Most of them really want to hear from their community and know what their community is thinking.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Unrelated. Oh, sorry, Dave, was that your hand up or?
Yeah, go right ahead, Stacy. I'll follow you.
Oh, I just, are you able to provide more information on the various tax proposals that are out there? In particular, I'd be interested in knowing more about the margins tax and how that could impact either the creation of new businesses in our community and or maybe make things a little bit more attractive to existing ones where they're struggling because they're paying off of, basically gross revenue at this point in time.
Yeah, so within the report that we'll send to you guys this weekend, we'll have an additional piece on the margins tax that will give a little bit of history, as well as I think that there's a link to a margins tax calculator, which you can kind of, plug in for your own company and see how it would work for you all.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Brad, just as a side note, I really do appreciate that our report is tailored towards our priorities. And I did notice that. So thank you for going to that extra step for doing that. That's
well, and I hope I'm trying to because I try and look at those and at least cover
Right.
the issues.
Yeah, it's
it may
very
not
helpful
be
for me.
sequential,
because,
but cover the
mean,
issues you guys
yeah,
want.
going to 4 organizations, legislative updates, my mind is spinning on all the
Yeah.
stuff. And so yours just makes it really easy for me to find what I need. So
Okay.
thank you.
We'll appreciate that, and we'll continue to try and do that.
Good.
Dave, did you have a question?
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into mine, because I have a few things that we're tracking over on the hospitality side. First and foremost, I'll agree with Shauna that, public safety is a real concern for everybody out in the field here, in my peer network. And we're disappointed that it hasn't been taken, quite seriously by the legislature thus far. And we'll be watching that really closely here. So updates, on that are appreciated by the chamber here. In hospitality, we're tracking a few things. First of all, to-go alcohol legislation, which was provided to us during the COVID days. They're looking at extending that or making those provisions permanent. I think we got thrown a curveball with this legislation yesterday from the governor's office, saying he wouldn't support the bill. So we're tracking that one. I don't know if there's anything further on that. I missed an update call yesterday.
That's on the alcohol delivery, you said?
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So that there was a hearing on that bill yesterday. There is ongoing conversations, but as you said, the governor did, send over a missive that he wants to see that the ability to do that sunset.
Okay,
And
so we'll be watching on the hospitality side. I know the team in Washington Hospitality is tracking really closely, and then
they are. And
we're also watching the tax on spirits. There's a tax on spirits and cans. I think that one of our local partners, Heritage Distilling, is pushing. Hospitality Association didn't want to chime in on it, but we're watching that one. And then another one we're watching is the bottle bill. And I think if you're familiar with that one, that is probably going to be in our backyard in terms of some sponsorships. So we'll appreciate it.
Yeah, all of those issues are churning very much. So I think what you're talking about is the difference in tax rate between how spirits are taxed versus beer and wine are taxed, and that differential.
Correct.
So that legislation is is being heard, I believe, next week, and is, an issue that's been around a long time.
Sure.
The spirits distributors want to try and levelize that tax rate between, especially in things like canned cocktails. So if it's 7% in, for a beer and wine cocktail, so I believe it's like Truly, versus some of the hard liquor based cocktails. The hard liquor cocktails may have the same percentage of alcohol in them, but they're taxed and significantly higher than the other ones.
Yeah, they're
trying to levelize that is the effort. Again, you've got differences of opinion depending on what brand of alcohol you're delivering and you're putting out, but that's certainly out there. You asked about the deposits on beverage containers. So that is a component of a larger bill called the WRAP Act, which is an entire, also a pretty significant change to packaging and recycling. So what the WRAP Act is what's called extended producer responsibility. So it would basically put the manufacturers of packaging materials, so think plastic bottles, aluminum cans, cardboard that's used from Amazon, all of those kinds of packaging materials. Manufacturers of those would be responsible for paying for the recycling system instead of either consumers or municipalities. And that's a shift, obviously. It's very controversial. A lot of stakeholders within that WRAP Act, there is also a component for deposit legislation. So other states do it, Oregon, California, where it's the 10-cent deposit on a beverage container that you pay when you purchase it, but when you return the container, you get that 10-cent back. There is a component of that within the WRAP Act. And all of these are big thorny issues that the legislature is going to be tackling.
I just want to hop in really quick just to backtrack, and this is really for Shauna and Dave. AWB did reach out last week. Their timing was kind of off for us, but they are really looking for stories, essentially, anecdotes from businesses, whether it be written or if you're willing to go on camera, just to talk about like public safety issues and impacts on the current legislation for them to use in their work on the crime legislation. So they did need it earlier this week, but I'm sure they would be happy to take more information. So if you are interested in sharing some stories or being willing to talk about it, I'm sure AWB would love to have you.
Okay, any other questions? We're nearing the end of the half hour here. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, Brad.
One more real quick.
All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Stacey.
Just any comments, since we were talking alcohol, on the 0.05 legislation?
That bill is moving. I haven't been following that one very
Okay.
closely, but that's actually Dave may know more about that, just because I know the Restaurant Association is following and actively involved with that
Right.
as well.
Yeah, we came out very strongly opposed to the legislation just because, you know, we have problems. We're sort of the front line of the arbiters of determining service and over service and where that line is. And at a 0.05 level of quote unquote intoxication, we don't have any guidelines to work with. So the association and the hospitality industry is very strongly opposed to this. We're disappointed to see it flying through, though. There's a lot of support for it for a lot of reasons, for perhaps a lot of good reasons. But we do think that there's an educational component that's missing from the piece. If we are to go to 0.05, there are also concerns about how does that play into liability, particularly, you know, on small businesses, small restaurants, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. I might follow up with you offline on that one.
Anytime. Thanks.
Okay, thank you guys. And David, are we scheduled on every 2 weeks, or what's our cadence for this?
I mean, we're only doing them once a month, right? Yeah.
Okay.
We're only
Yeah,
doing
I
last
them
think-
once a
Friday of
month.
the month.
Yeah, the last
Okay.
Friday of the month. So, yeah.
Okay, well, I look forward. Please feel free to
Yes.
communicate to Brooke and I. Brooke was stuck up in hearings today, but
Yeah.
normally both of us are on, and we look forward to talking to you again in a month. But at the
Yes.
same time, the reports are going to go out weekly, and you guys feel free to communicate back if you have questions.
Yep. Thank
All right.
you so much, Brad. We appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, Brad. Take care.